Welcome to the first weblog podcast of the Professor Baker weblog. Today's topic is controversial and it is called The Native Speaker Myth, Death, Wake, and Funeral of a Fallacy. Now today's date is December 11th, 2010, and again, this is the first podcast of the Professor Baker weblog. The native speaker fallacy is unwilling to be laid to rest. This fallacy, or myth, wants to live forever. It seduces language learners. It entices school owners. It promises global travel. There is something for everyone in this myth. It's useful to all of us, in one way or another. So we tolerate it, occasionally get indignant about it, but never do we take active steps to kill it, have its wake, dig a grave, have a funeral for the myth, and then actually bury it. I wonder if I have become anesthetized to its existence. After all, I've been an EFL teacher in Chile for the past 10 years. At some point, this issue catches my attention, holds me as I grapple with it intellectually and emotionally, and in the end, I make my own peace treaty with it. In most cases, we ELT teachers simply decide that there is nothing we can do about it. This leads teachers to seek employment wherever the myth and the system it creates allows us to gain employment. After all, the myth serves us all, neatly dividing its fruits to one and all, benevolently. The myth is a great benefactor for everyone. What system am I referring to? The system that places value on your worth as a teacher. This is done in a number of ways. One is by addressing the regulatory framework regarding who can work as a teacher of English. Legal requirements are put in place that stipulate the education and training that is necessary to be authorized to teach. To the best of my knowledge, most countries worldwide stipulate that completion of a university education is a minimum requirement for a native speaker. Other countries include completion of a TEFL or TESOL training course as well. Obviously, the intent here is to affect the teaching quality the students will receive. A second factor is regulated by the market. Whenever there is a high demand for a scarce supply, those who can supply that scarce commodity will reap the economic reward. What is in scarce supply is the native English-speaking teacher, the NEST. Parents want a nest for their children. Students want a nest for their language learning aspirations. I again remind you, the nest is the native English-speaking teacher, the NEST. Now here's the dilemma. Worldwide, non-native English-speaking teachers, or NNEST, outnumber the NEST. What's the ratio? 8 to 2, or 80% is a conservative estimate. That's 8 non-native English-speaking teachers to 2 native English-speaking teachers. It has been estimated by some to be as high as 9 to 1, or 90%. Consequently, the demand for native speakers can never be satisfied. So where does this leave us? Are students having to accept an inferior teacher? Of course not. Yet the myth exists that the native speaker is the superior teacher. Like all myths, it relies on ignorance and a notorious lack of empirical evidence. No, in this case, a total absence of evidence that suggests that the nest is a better teacher. Yet the myth persists and threatens to become immortal. What is the perception of this fallacy among ELT professionals? In 2007, in Chile, I replicated a British Council survey that had found that 44% agreement with the statement, "Native speakers make the best teachers." I was not surprised to find that only 28% of the ELT professionals in Chile agreed with the statement, "Native speakers make the best teachers." What did leave me puzzled, however, was that there appears to be a native speaker complex among ELT professionals in Chile. Somehow, teachers seem to be aware of their limitations, for example, in pronunciation, vocabulary, and idiomatic usage of the language. This gets rationalized as being due to them not being a native speaker. I shall return to this phenomenon later. So, based on the above information, what is the systematic manifestation of what has been called the native speaker fallacy in terms of employment in Chile? According to regulatory framework known as the General Education Law, or LGE for its Chilean initials, Ley General de Educación, anyone who has completed a university education can teach if the current demand cannot be adequately met by the supply of qualified teachers. This is the case for teachers of English in a foreign language in Chile. In light of this information, you can ask, where are the in-nest non-native English-speaking teachers teaching, and where are the native English-speaking teachers teaching? How does the myth provide employment for everyone? With rare exceptions, the non-native English-speaking teachers teach in the formal education system, and the native English-speaking teachers teach in the language institutes. This has been my personal observation over the past 10 years. Again, we see the myth is benevolent. It provides employment and profits for everyone. Well, how does this employment system work? What factors are at work in determining where a non-English speaking teacher, native English speaking teacher, will work? Logistically, most native English speaking teachers are not aware that the school year runs from March to December, and thus arrive in the country after the school year has begun. This is detrimental to any hope of being hired in the formal Chilean education system. Secondly, few native English-speaking teachers are prepared to accept the low salaries offered by most schools. Thirdly, few native English-speaking teachers have the training, and even fewer are emotionally prepared to cope with the classroom management demanded by classes of 40 to 45 students. Fourthly, most native English-speaking teachers arrive in country with no knowledge of Spanish whatsoever. Basic, rudimentary Spanish language skills are necessary to deal with the social requirements of administrative duties, parents, students' needs, and their colleagues. These 4 reasons are significant impediments, individually and collectively, but not an insurmountable obstacle if one does prior planning and preparation. However, for those who send their children to language institutes or study at language institutes themselves, the desire to learn to actually speak English is universal, primordial, the non plus ultra motivating factor in their enrollment decision. In addition, these paying customers are usually demanding one thing: the native English-speaking teacher. This fact induces language institutes to hire as many native English-speaking teachers as they possibly can, even if a qualified non-native English-speaking teacher is available. Again, that's even if a non-native English-speaking teacher is available. If a non-native English-speaking teacher and a native English-speaking teacher compete for the same job at a language institute, forget about it. If hired, the non-native English-speaking teacher will be given a lower salary. It has come to my attention that there are many institutes that advertise and market their services by highlighting the large number of native English-speaking teachers they have. Some go so far as to hire only native English-speaking teachers, not a single non-native English-speaking teacher, which is obviously discrimination, and blatant at that. Yet, the system tolerates it implicitly due to the long-entrenched belief that the non-native English-speaking teacher is good at teaching grammar, but not speaking. To conclude, the above is to be understood as a general overview, with exceptions. I feel that it is the exception, or rather the exceptions, that justify what I identify as the rule. Generally speaking, the rule can be spoken thusly. If you are a non-native English-speaking teacher, teach in the formal education system. You are prepared for this task by virtue of education and socio-cultural understanding. If you are a native English-speaking teacher, teach in a language institute because there is a huge demand there, largely unmet. To close, I will cite the teachers in my 2007 paper. We can all be good teachers, native English-speaking teachers and non-native English-speaking teachers alike, if we love to teach and try every day to be the best teacher for our students. Personally, I love to teach, and I try to be the best teacher I can be for my students. If you are like me and truly love teaching, join me in spreading the word to the rest of the stakeholders in the world: parents, students, colleagues, administrators, politicians, school owners, anyone who will read or listen to you. Join me in actively spreading this message. We are all good teachers. We all love teaching, and we all try to be the best we can be for our students. If we do this together, we can bury the myth forever. That would be a good thing. Don't you agree? We all have strengths and weaknesses as teachers of English. It is healthy to acknowledge that, but certainly unhealthy to dogmatize it, unhealthy to legitimize it as a system-wide economic practice, and unhealthy to accept it as an ELT ideological principle. The native speaker myth is dead. The wake begins today. The funeral and burial must be soon. The rotting corpse of the native speaker myth has already begun to stink. Thank you.